Chapter 1. Emotional control determines the kind of life we'll live and how happy we'll be in life. Our first problem with emotions is that we don't know how to identify them. Secondly, even when we do, we have no idea what to do. The majority of us lack emotional control, and we mistake emotions for intelligence. Emotional control is the ability to be in charge of how we react to situations by achieving a balance. The balance needed for our emotions is required at all levels. Be it our business relationships or love life, we must know when to react and when to lay low. It's okay to feel emotions like anger, pain, sadness, or joy. What makes anxiety come into play is when we fail to control these emotions. Unchecked, anger leads to violence, sadness leads to depression, and joy sometimes leads to overexcitement. Many of our reactions to our emotions come from our childhood experiences. People who come from violent homes tend to have violent outbursts, while people who come from a strict home find it hard to socialize. By understanding this, we can look back to where our emotional outbursts come from and make the necessary adjustments. Our lives depend on how much attention we pay to our emotions. When we understand our emotions, it will become easy to control them. Chapter 2. Our reactions to our emotions determine how we cope with real-life situations. We are all made by our emotions. Our most profound feelings, passions, and longings are essential guides, and as humans, we owe much of our existence to the power of emotions in our lives. Emotions lead to love, and the power of love is extraordinary. It is the only feeling that overrides the impulse for personal survival. Sociobiologists believe that we'll always choose the heart over the head when we need to make crucial decisions. They think that our emotions guide us in facing predicaments and tasks too important to leave to the intellect alone. When we are faced with predicaments like danger, painful loss, frustrations, building a family, etc., we tend to use emotions instead of logic. As we experience these life changes over again, our emotional reactions become imprinted in us as innate. At this point, our bodies automatically react to a situation whether we know about it or not. As important as emotions are, they can be overwhelming. For 14-year-old Matilda Crabtree, emotions got the better of her dad, who unknowingly shot her dead. Matilda had told him that she was staying at a friend's place overnight. However, when Mr. Crabtree, her dad, got home, she decided to play a practical joke on him. She jumped out of a closet and yelled, "Boo!" Scared, Mr. Crabtree pulled out his gun and shot his daughter in the neck. An important lesson about fear is that it mobilizes us to protect our loved ones from danger. However, sometimes our loved ones become a danger, and our impulses get the best of us. Automatic reactions that accompany fear have become etched in our nervous system because they made the difference between survival and death for a long and crucial period in our lives. To do that well in our lives, we must first understand what it means to use emotion intelligently. When we are faced with tough situations, our brain employs the use of emotional explosions. Emotional explosions proclaim an emergency in our brain, thereby recruiting the rest of the brain to act urgently. This triggers our reactions, which aren't allowed to fully grasp what is happening, let alone decide if it's a good idea. At the height of emotional explosions, we become illogical, and once the moment passes, we suddenly have no idea what came over us. Chapter 3. Academic intelligence has little to do with our emotional strength. The most intelligent humans can make decisions that are filled with unbridled passions and unruly impulses. People with high IQs can fare poorly when it comes to controlling their lives. IQ levels hardly explain the different prospective futures of people with roughly equal promises and opportunities. When 95 Harvard students in the 1940s were studied into middle age, the men with the highest scores in college were not that successful compared to their lower-scoring colleagues. In terms of general productivity or status in their field, they hardly measured up, and they didn't have some of the greatest life satisfaction. People who are emotionally adept and can manage their own feelings well are at an advantage in any domain of life, whether romance and intimate relationships. People who also read and deal effectively with other people's feelings do well with picking up the unspoken rules that govern success in organizational politics and relationships. People with well-developed emotional skills are more likely to be content and effective in their lives. Mastering the habits of our minds that foster our own productivity gives us an edge over those who don't. One huge mistake we mostly make as humans is that we believe that we are aware of our emotions. At first, it might seem that our feelings are obvious. However, more thoughtful reflection reminds us that we have been all too oblivious to what we really feel about something or realized late in the game. To define our emotions, we must first improve our self-awareness. Self-awareness means being aware of both our mood and our thoughts about that mood so that we can know what to do when we are emotional. Although there is a logical difference between being aware of our feelings and acting to change them, the two usually go hand in hand because to recognize a foul mood is to want to get out of it. Emotional self-control, delaying gratification and stifling impulsiveness, underlies accomplishment of every sort. Daniel Goleman. Chapter 4. When it comes to being in control of our emotions, the goal is to achieve a balance and not an emotional suppression. An essential thing we must note is that every feeling has its significance and value. A life without passion would be a boring one, devoid of genuine feelings that isolate us from the richness of life itself. In attaining emotional balance, what we should aim for is an appropriate emotion. When emotions are too silenced, they create dullness and distance, and when out of control, they tend to become too pathological and overwhelming. Keeping our distressing emotions in check is vital to our emotional well-being. Extreme emotions that are too intense or linger for too long undermine our cognitive stability. Life is full of ups and downs, but we need to be in balance to make sense of it. It is not that we have to avoid unpleasant feelings to feel content, but rather that bad feelings are not left unchecked. Allowing our emotions to control us leads us to uncontrollable anger. However, with the right mindset, people who have intense episodes of anger or depression can still feel a sense of well-being if they have a well-planned set of equally happy times. On the other hand, when we allow our worries to become severe, they grow into a phobia. Phobia leads to additional cognitive problems like obsessive-compulsive disorder or panic disorder. In situations like this, most of us resort to medication to interrupt the cycle. Drugs may offer us a temporary respite, but when we stop the medicines, anxiety disorders will most likely recur. When our emotions overwhelm our concentration, we lose the ability to hold in our minds all information relevant to the task at hand. A great example to the extent to which emotional upsets can interfere with mental life is no news to teachers, especially those at the elementary level. Students who are anxious, angry, or depressed hardly learn because they do not take in information efficiently or deal with it well. To help out, these teachers must first create a relaxed environment and advise them to be vocal about their feelings. When we fail to be vocal about our feelings, we suppress too many emotions that puts us at risk of a sudden, violent outburst. Chapter 5. The more open we are to our emotions, the more skilled we will be in understanding our feelings. Alexithymics are people who find it difficult to read other people's feelings. This happens because they are either too unbothered or unable to interpret feelings. The major problem of alexithymics is that they are confused about their own feelings. This is why they are always equally bewildered when other people express their feelings to them. The failure to register another person's feelings is a significant deficit in emotional intelligence and a tragic failing in what it means to be human. For every intimate emotion, the root of caring stems from emotional attunement. The need to know how another person feels in our lives is essential. The absence of empathy is very telling, especially on the other person, and its lack is seen in criminal psychopaths, rapists, and child molesters. People's emotions are rarely put into words. Far more often, they are expressed through other cues. The key to understanding another person's feelings is in the ability to read nonverbal signs like the tone of voice, gesture, facial expression, etc. The power of empathy is what prevents us from the things that we consider to be unfair to others. Unfortunately, for those who commit the most mean-spirited of crimes, empathy is lacking. A psychological fault line that is common to rapists, child molesters, and many perpetrators of family violence alike is that they are incapable of empathy. The inability to feel their victim's pain allows them to tell themselves lies that encourage their crime. The ability to know another person's feelings is essential because it is the core of the art of handling relationships. To manifest romantic emotional power, we must first reach a benchmark of self-control which is needed to clamp down on our anger and distress. Attunement to others demands a level of calm in oneself. Chapter 6. Emotional intelligence is essential to our relationships and love life. People with whom we like to be because their emotional skills make us feel good are those we last longer with. People who can help us soothe our feelings have an especially valued social presence in our lives. Our emotional stance is more likely a result of our childhood. For example, boys take pride in lone, tough-minded independence and autonomy, while girls see themselves as part of a web of connectedness. Therefore, boys are threatened by anything that might change their independence, while girls are more threatened by a disturbance in their relationships. These differences in perspectives mean that men and women want very different things out of a conversation. While men are content to talk about something, in contrast, women seek emotional connection and validation. Marital therapists have long discovered that by the time a couple finds their way to a therapist, they are most likely in a pattern of engage withdrawal. This pattern occurs when the husband complains about the wife's unreasonable demands and outbursts, and the wife laments his indifference to what she is saying. This common marital issue reflects the fact that both spouses have two emotional realities. The roots of these emotional differences can be traced back to childhood and to the separate emotional worlds boys and girls inhabit while growing up. The nonchalant attitudes of men to bring up problems in a relationship and their lackadaisical attitude towards women's issues is due to their relative lack of skill when it comes to reading facial expressions. For example, women are more sensitive to a sad expression on a man's face than men are in detecting sadness from a woman's expression. Thus, a woman has to show more sadness for a man to notice her feelings in the first place, let alone for him to raise the question of what is making her unhappy. The key to having a beautiful relationship is understanding that you can't be right all the time, and that avoidance only breeds more problems. The key to finding a way around marital problems is reaching an agreement on how to disagree. Men and women have to overcome their biased gender differences in approaching negative emotions. Failing this, many couples will be vulnerable to emotional rifts that can eventually tear their relationship apart. Chapter 7. Among sick people, understanding of emotions is essential because uncontrollable fear is just a thought away. We can be emotionally fragile while we are sick because our mental well-being is based on the illusion of invulnerability. Sickness attacks our confidence, thereby attacking our belief that our private world is safe and secure. Suddenly, we feel weak, helpless, and vulnerable. The problem with sick people is that medical personnel ignore how patients react emotionally to many things. This negligence to the emotional reality of illness ignores a growing body of evidence showing that people's emotional states play a significant role in their general well-being. Modern medical care too often lacks adequate emotional intelligence. Anxiety has been proven by scientists to lower the immune system. Since our minds are deeply connected to our brains, when we feel down, our brains will automatically follow suit. The adverse effects of anxiety are not just that it lowers the immune response. Other research shows more adverse effects on the cardiovascular system. While chronic hostility and uncontrolled anger seem to put men at greater risk for heart disease, the more deadly emotions in women may be anxiety and fear. In research carried out at Stanford University School of Medicine, more than 1,000 men and women who had suffered a first heart attack went on to suffer a second heart attack. High levels of fearfulness and anxiety marked these attacks. After their first heart attack, many patients stopped driving, quit their jobs, or avoided going out, depending on the traumatic experience they had. The brain and the mind are interwoven and inseparable. To live well, we have to think well and control our emotional reactions. A primary reason why medical practitioners sometimes ignore the emotions of their patients is that medications exist. Medicine, over the years, has become more responsive to the demands of the business. There is a business advantage for medications where customers come and buy drugs all the time. By paying attention to emotions, many drugs won't sell, and the business crumbles. However, emotional care can save money because it prevents or delays the onset of sickness or helps patients heal more quickly. Chapter 8. Traumatic experiences expose us to fears that can become very damaging to our mental health. Violent acts are more traumatic than natural catastrophes because, unlike victims of natural disasters, victims of violence feel themselves to have been intentionally selected as the target of hostility. The feeling that something terrible happened to us makes us question our importance to the environment. It shatters our assumptions about the trustworthiness of people and the safety of the world. Within an instant of traumatic events, the world becomes a dangerous place, one in which people are potential threats to our safety. The worst type of traumatic experience people fear is human cruelty. Human cruelties stamp their victims' memories with a constant fear that comes back with anything similar to the assault itself. A boy who was struck on the back of his head while never seeing his attacker will be so frightened afterward that he would find it difficult to walk down the street alone. When we feel there is something we can do in a catastrophic situation, we fare far better emotionally than those who feel utterly helpless. The feeling of helplessness is what makes an event overwhelming. In situations where we don't feel helpless, we fare better because we know we can defend ourselves. For example, suppose someone who is attacked with a knife knows how to defend himself and takes action, while another person in the same predicament believes he's helpless. In that case, the helpless person is the one more susceptible to PTSD afterward. It's the feeling that our life is in danger and there's nothing we can do to escape it that causes us to panic. Fear conditioning is the process whereby something that is not threatening becomes dreaded as it is associated in our mind with something frightening. It is essential to always confront our fears and come face to face with them before we can tackle them. Although through relearning, fear conditioning can be removed from us. In PTSD, spontaneous relearning fails to occur because traumatic events can hardly be relearned. Chapter 9. Emotional illiteracy is a neglected issue that can cause a reduction in cognitive performance of children. Educators and teachers continue to be disturbed by school children's lagging scores in calculations and reading. On taking a closer look, they discovered a common problem, which is emotional illiteracy. Although conscious efforts are being made to raise academic standards, the troubling deficiency is not being addressed in the standard school curriculum. The current emphasis in schools suggests that teachers care more about how well school children can read and write than how well they are coping emotionally. The most prevalent cause of cognitive disability among teenagers is unchecked mental illness. Symptoms of depression, irrespective of its magnitude, affect up to 1/3 of teenagers, and for girls, depression doubles when they reach puberty. The frequency of binge disorders in teenage girls continues to grow exponentially. Unless things change, the long-term prospects for today's children and teenagers marrying and having a fruitful, stable life together are growing more dismal with each generation. Many kids are irrepentant bullies who take solace in passing on their insecurities towards others in a violent way. When they have challenges with someone, they immediately see the person in an antagonistic way. They jump to conclusions about the other person's hostility toward them without trying to think of a peaceful way to settle their differences. Most bullies are depressed children who came from violent homes. Depressed children and teenagers are frequently unable or unwilling to talk about their sadness. They cannot label their feelings accurately, and instead they show impatience, irritability, and anger. This, in turn, makes it difficult for their parents to offer them emotional support, setting in motion a downward spiral that ends in constant arguments and isolation. Schools have a central role in building character by reiterating the importance of self-discipline and empathy, which enables true commitment to moral values. It is not enough to lecture children about values. They need to practice them. They need to understand the dangers of being too emotional or being too reserved about their emotions. They must be taught how to control anger, depression, sadness, pain, joy, etc. Through this, they can understand their emotions and how to control them. Did you know? According to the World Health Organization, globally, more than 264 million people of all ages suffer from depression. Conclusion. The emotional mind is far quicker than the rational mind. It springs into action without pausing for a moment to consider or reflect on what it is doing. Its illogical quickness prevents deliberate, analytic, and careful reflection, which is the most important aspect of the thinking mind. In human evolution, this quickness most likely revolved around that most basic decision: what to pay attention to, who to hold responsible. In the face of danger, the emotional mind is known for making quick decisions that it thinks is the best for the body. This is why we can immediately close our eyes when a fly aims for the eyeball. We react to things in different ways based on our level of emotional control. However, what we fail to grasp is that we cannot allow our emotions to control us. It's okay to feel every emotion, but what's not okay is letting the emotion lord over us. The most important aspect of emotion is balance. With balance, it becomes easier to anticipate our reactions and do all we can to tame our outbursts. It also becomes easier to anticipate a situation and react accordingly. Once we can balance our emotions between the good and the bad emotions, we'll feel more in control of our lives. Try this. Conduct an inner dialogue with yourself to cope with a topic or challenge or reinforce your own behavior. Improve on decision making, control your impulses, set your goals, and identify alternative actions and anticipate consequences. The key to understanding the perspective of others is first to understand yourself.